Hi, I'm Nigel the Shanghai Psychic. I can tune into your loved ones in the spirit world, but I can also tune into you, tell you about your path and the choices that you need to make and need to know. I'm currently giving 30% discount on all Tell Craig Your Story listeners. Just use the code Tell Craig Your Story for 30% off your first psychic reading with me online at Nigel the Shanghai Psychic.
Hello everyone, Craig here. Welcome to another edition of the podcast, Tell Craig Your Story. It's an absolute honour to welcome onto the podcast today one of my favourite players from the Newcastle Knights. He is a Newcastle Knights legend, Billy Peden. Now, Billy was born in Cessnock, Australia. He played 190 games for the Newcastle Knights and 25 games for the London Broncos from 94 to 2002. He was a two-time Premiership winner in 97 and 2001, where he scored 2 tries that game. He's also an ambassador for the Mark Hughes Foundation, where they raise awareness for brain cancer. And you can check out my podcast that I did with Mark Hughes 2 years ago. In 2011, Billy was named in the Cessnock Goanna's Team of the Century. But before we go, please go to our website. We are at Podbean. Tell Craig Your Story at podbean.com. We have a link tree there which tells you where Tell Craig Your Story podcast is streaming. We are on all the major streaming services. We also have a YouTube account there. Make sure to subscribe and get all the latest updates. We have VK for our Russian listeners and WeChat for our Chinese listeners at Tell Craig Your Story. All right, here we go. This is my chat with Newcastle Knights legend Billy Peden on Tell Craig Your Story podcast. Hi Billy, how are you going today?
Good, thanks, mate. Nice to talk from all the way over in Shanghai.
Yeah, it's a bit of a distance from home. Like I was just saying, pretty keen to come back home and have some of Mum's cooking and have a meat pie.
Yeah, I don't imagine there'd be many meat pies over there.
No, not at all. Billy, tell us what's been happening with work-wise. Are you still involved with the Knights as well? Tell us a little bit about that.
Work-wise, I work over at the coal loader on the Harbour, Newcastle Harbour. So
Right.
That's basically what I do, work shift work. So that can be a challenge at times, but it's it's a good job, and it's the lifeblood of the region, the coal industry. So
Absolutely.
It's nice to contribute a little bit to the community outside of the sporting arena. In terms of the Knights, I help out here or there, but more so as part of the old boys. We've on occasion we'll be asked to present a jumper or help out or give a bit of advice here or there, or sometimes it's not wanted. So
Yeah.
we try and keep our bibs out when that's the case. But we're pretty. It's a bit of a family, the Knights. We consider ourselves more of a family than a club. So whatever any of us old boys can do to help the club or the current players, we'll certainly do that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about the Knights. They had a good win on the weekend. How do you think they're going and prospects of making the top 8 this year?
Well, look, I think we're in a better position than we were this time last year.
Yes.
The table probably doesn't reflect that. And there's been a little bit of controversy over the last couple of weeks with having the bye and players going on holidays and things like that. But
would that ever happen in your day, Billy?
Oh, look, it did. We were given weekends off if there was a bye, and we probably had smaller wages back then, so we wouldn't go overseas. We'd probably go up the Cross Harbour or something like that, you know. But
yeah.
look, I actually spoke to Adam O'Brien about it last night, and it was interesting because, you know, he's copped a lot of flack over it, and the club's copped a lot of flack. But the other side of it is there's a lot of scientific professionals that are looking at the preparation, and they've decided that the players needed a refresh and a disconnect from the everyday of the club. So,
yes,
you know, far be it from former footballers and commentators that have no idea about the scientific approach to actually comment on something that's probably outside of their scope of knowledge. So,
yeah,
and, you know, like, I've got no drama with it. And to be honest, they got beat quite easily by Parramatta the week before the bye, and we come up and have a good win after it. So maybe it was the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It shot a lot of people up with that really good win on the weekend. So
I think it looks well for prospects for the future. You know, I think Kalen coming out and playing better, and obviously defensively a lot better. His confidence looked a lot higher, and he was wanting the ball all the time. You know, so there's quite improved performers across the park. You know, so even though it's not reflected on the table, I think a bit of confidence and possibly a couple of wins, and we'll all of a sudden we're up to our neck to get into the semis. So hopefully that's the case.
And do you have any up-and-coming players, especially like you're from Cessnock, in the local league that are on the fringe of making the Knights?
There's always, I think the Newcastle competition at the moment is probably as strong as it's been in a long time. You know, we just had a couple of representatives in the countryside that beat City and all that sort of thing. You know, there's a young kid called Luke Huff who's playing hooker for Cessnock, and Adam Clune's brother Sam's actually playing for Cessnock as well, the countryside. So there's a bit of strength there, you know, and that's good for the Knights because it does put pressure on people above. But, you know, obviously systems are probably a little bit different than they were in our day when I was given the opportunity from local league to come in and play for the Knights. The process is a little bit more complicated and different, and you know, there used to be a reserve grade and, you know, 21 reserve grade, first grade. Nowadays, it's a little bit more complex, and you know, the top 30 contracts and all that sort of thing. It is a little bit more complex and probably a little bit harder to make that jump from local league. But I certainly believe there's quite a few players in that local comp that could step up and grab an opportunity if it was given.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Huff boy. There've been lots of talks. Do you think he's ready to play first grade, or do you think he still needs some time in reserve grade?
Oh, I think, you know, so-called reserve grade, definitely. You know, it is similar, you know, but it is still a big jump, you know, and to go up against professionals that are living and breathing and everything they do is to be successful on the weekend. To compete in that arena straight away is it's not impossible, but it's pretty hard, you know. So there would be a process to follow and some progression that he would need to take on to get to that level. So, you know, but, you know, given an opportunity, blokes like that can shine.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, Billy. And for our international listeners, tell us where you grew up. I believe you were born in Cessnock?
Yeah, I was born in a small mining community about an hour outside of Newcastle called Cessnock. It was sort of blue-collar sort of town, and, you know, some people might call it a little bit rough. We didn't think it was. You know, and I still don't think it was. It was a good upbringing, I think. You know, we were grounded. My father owned the local pub, so it was a case of I knew most of the people in town because of my dad owning the pub. So it was
right.
That was good and a bad thing. You know, if ever I tried to get out and have an underage drink, everyone knew who I was, so it was a little bit hard. But, like I say, to grow up in country New South Wales, I think, you know, we're a pretty fortunate area. You know, like we probably weren't the most affluent area, but, you know, we sort of had enough to put food on the table and do what we needed to do, you know. So probably a pretty lucky upbringing, really.
Yeah. Were your dad involved in rugby league as well, and did he play rugby league?
Yeah, he played for Cessnock. He was actually a halfback back in the day. So
right.
You know, he played and actually I think he won a reserve grade comp for the Cessnock Goannas in 1964. So
Yeah, right.
But yeah, he was involved in the game, and a lot of the players would come and have a beer after the game at his establishment, and he's quite good mates with two pretty famous footballers in Andrew and Matthew Johns as father. Gary used to come and
I kind of remember those people.
they sort of went all right, and they're pretty good in the media as well. So
Yes.
but Gary used to come to the pub and have a couple of beers, and he coached a few sides back in the day, and he used to bring the sides back to the pub, and then Matt and Joe and myself and a couple of other young lads like Scotty Bradley and a few Toddy Edwards, we used to play footy in the backyard of the pub because there was a bit of a backyard there but it had a dirty great rose bush in the middle, so you had to be very careful of the rose bush or you'd end up with a million thorns in you. So it was it was a brave man that took on the rose bush.
Was it always rugby league was your passion, or was it other sports?
Yeah, well, sort of in where we grew up, it was sort of rugby league in winter and cricket in summer, and it was. There definitely was. There was the soccer team called the Hornets in Cessnock. There was sort of two factions. You're either a rugby league man or a soccer man, So, and because of, I suppose, my father's influence and the friends that he had, he was also good friends with Neil Pringle, who coached the Goannas in 1983, I think it was. So, I suppose you could say I was always going to be a rugby league supporter, whether I was, a competent player or not. I was always going to have something to do with rugby league. So, it's just what you did in those days. There wasn't all the opportunities for other sports. And, since I've moved to Newcastle, I got into surfing and that sort of thing. But that certainly wasn't an option for us back in Cessnock.
Yeah. You would have been loving going into Newcastle, having the beach there every day.
Yeah, it was sort of a bit of a life change when I moved down here. So it was, it's something that probably in my life probably has changed direction in that degree, and in what I do for outside of work and for fun and all that sort of stuff. The ocean's quite a big part of it now.
I saw that on your Instagram page. You have like a brand new surfboard there. How's that all going now?
Yeah, I actually put a big dent in it until like a couple of days after.
Oh, really? Right.
I went on a surfing trip to Indonesia and, I managed to fall off and smashed into the reef. So the bloke that made it for me, an old mate of mine, Peden, I've just dropped it out during the day to try and fix it up.
Oh, right.
It was a bit of an expensive mistake, that one.
Yeah, right. You didn't injure yourself?
No, I was pretty fortunate. It is possible. It's not so much sand over there as reef bottoms, and you can get yourself in a bit of grief, and particularly with my lack of ability, it's always a possibility.
So, when you were playing rugby league, when did you get your first break to start playing rep teams?
Yeah, well, it was sort of a funny evolution. I was a really late bloomer in terms of physical growth, so I was a really small kid. I loved the game, but I was just really bad at it. I just wasn't good. so up until about under 18s, I sort of, I didn't really ever threaten any rep sides or anything like that, and even to under 18s, I didn't make a rep side. I was sort of, I played for Cessnock under 18s, and then obviously after that, you have to go into open grade and play, whether you play first grade, reserve grade or third grade for your local town. So my first year I played a couple of games reserve grade, but ended up playing first grade. I think I was 19 years old for Cessnock, when the game was probably a little bit more free in terms of what people could do to each other. So for an underdeveloped, young, inexperienced, naive young bloke, I learned some lessons very quickly with bent noses and all that sort of business. So I certainly learned how to fall and to duck and weave, that's for sure.
Oh, Billy, like when I was a kid, like I told before, when my parents live in Maryland, I'd go down and watch the Wallsend Maryland Tigers. And I used to have so much fun. They used to have the bikie gang on the hill. And any team that come to play, you knew that you were in like a fight, and guaranteed a fight anytime. Oh, it was just such a great experience. Tell us about some of those times, Billy.
Oh, look, it was a funny old time. Sometimes Cessnock and our local one of our neighbouring communities, Curry, where Mark Hughes from the
Oh,
Mark Hughes Foundation came from. We were more
big
rivals,
rivals.
so
Yeah.
massive rivalry. So it was nothing for massive fights throughout the game, and sometimes there'd be more fights on the hill than there were in the game. So it was a pretty wild sort of scenario, and obviously the game's cleaned up, and it had to,
Yes.
it was quite violent. But there was some genuinely tough people that we all looked up to, and they stood up for their mates and all those old Aussie values that we're proud of. That I won't say we're losing them, but you know what I mean. It just probably isn't the same anymore, and we've learned that like you say, injury protocols and all that sort of stuff. That there probably is a need to protect people from themselves a little bit more, because you get put in that situation, you're going to say you're all right when you're not all right, And
Yeah.
so the game's probably improved a little bit there. But when, like looking back at those days, I remember one day I got sent off, unfortunately, at Curry for I can't remember what indiscretion I did, but I was on my way off with kicking stones, sort of jogging off to the shed. And I looked at this lady, yelled at me. I looked up and she threw a hot pie straight in my face.
Oh,
so
damn.
that's how it was back in those days.
Yeah.
You had to pay to play. If you did something wrong, you cop some retribution, whether it was from the crowd or whether it was from the other team. So it was it was a colourful time to play. It was good memories and fond memories. But I'm probably glad that it has cleaned up a little bit for the younger boys coming through.
Yeah.
They maybe don't have to go through that.
Yeah. Were you on contracts at that stage, or was it like just play to win, or you get a certain amount to win or a certain amount to lose, or how does that work?
We were semi-professional, so we would get paid until you got to a certain point within that competition. It would be just year to year, and you might get $150 a win or something like that. So it wasn't great money, but it was it topped your wage up, and it sort of inspired you to try and get a little bit further. And like I say, there were contracted players where towards the end, I think I was on a contract where I might have got $1,500 every 5 or 10 games. You know what I mean? So I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was semi-professional. And once I started, I think 92, I made the Newcastle rep side.
Oh yes.
Cessnock. So then you could start to sort of ask for a contract, and I'd normally ask for a contract, and they'd normally say no, and then I'd say, "Oh, right, yeah."
I'm going to Curry.
I sort of threatened that a few times, and it just fell on deaf ears. So, a few of my teammates, they moved to different clubs. One of my greatest mates, Jamie Forbes, moved to Toronto and won a competition there. And a few of the blokes from the local Newcastle rep team moved to Cessnock, and there was a bit of player movement, but it was only sort of the elite ones within that competition that would move around for money. So I never really considered going anywhere else other than Cessnock up until I think it was the end. I made the Newcastle rep side again the next year in 1993, and it was at the end of that year that I got a phone call from the then reserve grade coach for the Newcastle Knights, Robert Finch.
Oh,
and
right. Yes.
As luck would have it, I'd had a massive night the night before, and the phone rings, and that's Robert Finch on the phone. I went, no way, it's not him. I said, sure, it's Matty Johns ringing up.
Yeah,
having a go at me for sure. So I get on there thinking it's Matty, and it's like he's going, oh mate, I want you to come to training tomorrow. We're going to do a big run. They had this fearsome run called the Black Butt Run, which was it was a huge, virtually 10 kilometres uphill. It was a real test of your character, and it was local folklore, and everyone knew about it. And they said, oh, we want you to do that tomorrow. And I said, oh, look, I'm sorry, I've got something on tomorrow. I can't do it, because I thought it was Matty Johns.
Right.
So eventually he said, oh, we'll just come Monday afternoon then. So I went, all right, yeah. So I hung up the phone, and I still didn't believe it was him until I actually got a phone call from one of the boys going. And I spoke to them, and they said, no, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. I went, oh, no, it actually probably was Robert Finch. So I've fobbed him off for the first training session, but it was actually him. But I turned up on Monday and obviously realised that I was coming from a position of weakness in terms of bargaining potential. So, so I just had to make every post a winner. Everything I had to do, 100%. Any sort of training drill, I had to try and be as good as I could be. And it took a lot of catching up to the guys that had been, a little bit more professional than what I'd been at Cessnock. Some of those blokes were bench pressing stuff, like mini minors, and I'm getting in there and hardly ever been to the gym before, So I think that first Monday they got us all together with all the forwards, and I think Chief and Sarge nearly had a fight, and then they said, "Oh, we're going to wrestle" and all this sort of stuff, and And so I had to pair off with Paul Marquette, who's like tough and strong, and one of the greatest competitors you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't realise that. So I just looked at him and thought he's not that much bigger than me. So at least I might have some sort of chance with him. And well, we got into a wrestle. He nearly ripped my arms off and put my legs down the ears. And it was certainly an experience, that's for sure. He nearly tore me to pieces. So from that day on, I made it a mission to try and be as strong as I could in the gym and get sort of catch up to where those blokes were. And it was a real eye opener and a massive learning curve. But once again, I was very fortunate to have Andrew and Matthew Johns there that I'd known from growing up. So they gave me tips along the way and pointers and sort of just helped me in that transition from sort of semi-professional local league to actually this is the big show and this is where it all counts and they play for keeps up here, you know what I mean? So I was probably, and just in terms of just shyness to turn up into a big group of, some of them had played for Australia, and here I was walking in from
Chief
Cessnock,
and Sergeant,
and I'd never even considered, hardly even met anyone that had played for Australia before. So that was certainly an eye opener and a real surreal experience, and something that I look back on with really fond memories.
Yeah, and it says here that 94 was your debut. Did you come off the bench that day?
Yeah, I came at the end of the 93 season, so we did the pre-season leading into 94, and I was a forward. I'd only ever played lock, second row, and the odd game front row. I
was going to say, Billy, sorry to cut you off there. What was your preferred position? Like, you played hooker, you played in the front row, in the back row?
Yeah, it was mainly lock, second row was where I played most of my footy. So, but when I got to the Knights, we were chock full of forwards, and so the reserve grade coach said, I think Matthew Roble did his knee, who was the incumbent first grade halfback. So Andrew Johns went from being the reserve grade halfback at 19 or whatever he was, he was very young, straight into first grade. So they didn't have a halfback in reserve grade. So my first game for the Knights, I'd never played in the backs before, was halfback in reserve grade for the Knights. So
wow,
here I am running around like thinking, trying to be a ball player and going, I've never played in the backs before. So that was an experience. But we had a really good reserve grade side. They'd made the grand final the year before, so that made that transition a lot easier. And we had some really good structures in place from the coaching staff. So that, and it also I think accelerated my learning and my football knowledge. Learning the game at a higher level. That probably accelerated by being thrust into that situation that was certainly uncomfortable.
Yeah. And what was it like running out for the first time? International Sports Centre, I think it was called those days.
It was, but my actual first game was against South Sydney, I think it was. No, it was the Roosters at the old SFS.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I'd never played at a ground like that before. So here I was down in Sydney playing halfback for the Knights versus the Roosters at the SFS. And it was like couldn't stop pinching myself. It was like, like, is this really happening? So it was, that was certainly something to savour. And, some of those blokes in that team I'm still great mates with now, like Timmy Madison and there's quite a few boys that I still talk to quite regularly now from that team. And I'm really fortunate and feel really lucky that I got the opportunity at the Knights, because I've made so many great friends and friendships out of it, and grown so many relationships. So, yeah, very, very humbled to get the opportunity to play in the red and blue. And as I said before, now I've got one red eye and one blue eye. I still do whatever I could for the club. I love the place.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but those reserve grade teams in the early to mid 90s, they were pretty strong, weren't they? Didn't they win a comp there at one stage?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
They'd played in the grand final. The reserve grade side had played in the grand final in '93, and then we made it again in '94.
Right.
We actually got beat by Cronulla, and
Yes.
'93 they'd been beaten by North Sydney.
Remember that?
So they had a fair bit of expectation, and the first grade side hadn't really sort of got to a grand final or got to that point before. So when it got down to the pointy end of the season, a lot of sort of focus turned to the reserve grade team, because they were still in the semis and a chance to win the club's first competition. So
right.
So '94, we got beat by Cronulla in the grand final, which was really tough to take, because I'd come from Cessnock, where we struggled to win a game, and then came to the Knights where it was just expected you won, or you died trying, So to get to the grand final, and we were actually favourites, and we got beaten. It was a really bitter pill to swallow. I remember being devastated, and come back the next year, and I feel that we really had a point to prove, and to the point where we wouldn't call ourselves reserve grade. We called ourselves alternative first grade, because we all believed we were first graders playing reserve grade. So.
Yeah, that's right. Waiting for that call up, right?
Yeah, we were just waiting for that opportunity, and 95 rolls around, and started the year. Actually, in the trials, I started the year, but then played a few first reserve, like combined first and reserve grade trials. But I did my medial ligament in my knee in one of the trials, so I missed the first one or two games with injury, and so then I made it back on the field and made the starting side in the reserve grade side in '95, and about halfway through the year I got picked in the first grade squad, and pretty much didn't really go. I came back. We made the semi-finals in first grade, and we got knocked out by Manly, I think it was, a game short of the grand final. Cliffy Lyons scored in the wet. Yeah. And then because Robbie Ross and myself had played a few reserve grade games, well, we qualified to go play in the reserve grade grand final. So we went back and trained with reserve grade the grand final week, and played in the '95 grand final, both of us off the bench. And because we spoke to the coach, Peter Sharp, and we didn't think it was fair that he didn't, and we didn't think it was fair that we would start the game in front of the blokes that had got it. So we came off the bench, and we were fortunate enough to beat Cronulla in the grand final and get a bit of revenge back. And so that was the club's first grand final victory, and it was pretty special to be a part of. And just at the conclusion of the grand final, they picked the World Cup squad, and quite a few of our first grade boys got a start. I think Adam Muir, the two Johnsies, and Sarge and Chief, I think, all made the World Cup squad. So there was a lot of celebrating done, for our mates and for ourselves. And I think we all shaved our heads after we won the game. So it was all fun and games for a couple of weeks until we settled down and got back into our working lives.
You could just see that it was brewing with the Knights, and that stage when the reserve grade won the grand final, they lost it the year before. You could just feel it getting better and the team getting stronger.
Yeah, there was an evolution, I think. We had a really competitive reserve grade squad, which in turn put pressure on the first graders, and then the first graders, really took it up a notch, and I think to have a healthy club, you need that. You need that competition, and you need people pushing the people in front of them. You can't be too comfortable in a game like rugby league because you go backwards. So I think we were fortunate enough to have a really good, and we had some great coaching staff. We had
Mal Reilly at that stage.
Malcolm Reilly in '95. But previous to that, we'd had David Wade, who was a real technician. And previous to that, Alan McMahon, who'd set the sort of the boundaries and the pillars of the club, you know.
Yes.
So, and you had blokes like Alan Bell and Robert Finch involved that were really, really smart with their footy, you know. So we had a really good grounding footy-wise. And then Malcolm came in, obviously great with the footy as well, but he was a tremendous man manager, and you know, he certainly got the best out of me in terms of when he challenged me. It was I just didn't want to let him down, and I think the majority of the team were like that. And Malcolm had that presence that no one ever wanted to let him down because he was that revered, and you know he was that sort of leader, you know, that you wanted to do your best for him and with him, you know.
Was he like an aggressive coach, or would he just come in, like talk to you normally, or how did he approach it?
Yeah, I wouldn't call him aggressive. I'd call him steely. You know,
Yeah.
like he had that reputation when he played. You know, like a lot of us were old enough to have watched him actually play. So when he got given the job, they showed us a video of him playing, and some of the things that he did were pretty violent, you know. And we were all going, geez, you know, what have we got here? And, but he was uncompromising but he wasn't. I would not call him an aggressive coach. But you certainly knew where you stood, and you know you didn't want to get on the end of one of his serves. You know, if you'd have done the wrong thing at training. So I do remember the first training session he turned up for. We were running around the actual horse racing track in Broadmeadow in Newcastle, and the grass was this long, you know, and we were flogging ourselves around there, and because I didn't have the great, I wasn't one of the Johns brothers in terms of what I could read with football and the skills, so I had to train hard. So we get there, and it's Malcolm's first session. I've absolutely run my guts out. Couldn't have run any harder. You know, I've pushed myself to the absolute limits. And then we get that was on the Monday or Tuesday or whatever, and then we get a letter in the mail a couple of days later, like literally snail mail letter that clearly went to everyone, but I thought it just went to me. And it said, I don't care who you think you are, what you are in the club or whatever. That training was just not up to standard. You need to push yourself more, otherwise you'll be leaving the club. And I just thought, oh, that's it. I'm gone. I can't train any harder than that. I'll be sacked tomorrow. I'm sacked. So I was assuming that I was sacked because of the letter we got, but it was just once again me being naive, and it was just a blanket letter to the team. And but that was how Malcolm. He expected excellence, and if you didn't give it to him, he would let you know. You know, so I think the club and the players and the personalities we had in the club really thrived under that strong attitude that Malcolm brought.
Yeah, absolutely. 97 grand final. Come on. It almost feels like yesterday. I didn't go to the game, but I watched it. I watched it on the TV with my family, and I was always like thinking like, I hope they win, but it's Manly. They've beat us all year. They've smashed us at home, and I hope they win, but let's just see how they go. So tell us what some of the memories of the 97 grand final. What was Mal Reilly's sort of game plan for you?
Well, for a start, like, I think you're right, what you said there. Like, the whole community just thought, oh, Jesus, great they got there, you know what I mean? We hadn't beaten Manly for, I think it was 11 games on the trot.
Yeah.
So it was a tall ask on the biggest day in the year to actually come up and try and beat a team that you haven't beaten the last 11 times you played them. So, and you had the Chief and Spard and all that sort of stuff. But the lead-up was terrific, you know.
Oh.
Like, I remember when we beat North Sydney to make it to the grand final. In the final, we beat North Sydney, and
that was a great game as well.
Yeah, it was a terrific finish to the game, and you know, like Matty Johns was kicking field goals.
Yeah,
and, you know, it was in the wet.
Darren Albert chasing what was his name? Matty Sears across the other side of the field. Wow.
Yeah, without that tackle, we don't make the grand final.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we start celebrating a little bit in the sheds, and I remember Tony Butterfield coming in and saying, "What are you celebrating about? We got a job next week. We're not just doing this just to play in a grand final. We're going to win this thing, you know." And that was to me a bit of an eye opener, like, and it was a cue for a lot of us, particularly the younger ones, or the less experienced ones, to pull our heads in a little bit and realise that we've got an opportunity here to do something for the region that hadn't been done before, and it was almost going to be bigger than a game, and I think Chief conveyed that to us on a few occasions leading up to it. We went down to the grand final breakfast. We stayed the night before in Sydney, so we left on a bus on Tuesday afternoon to do the grand final breakfast on the Wednesday morning, and people were lining the streets to see the bus away on Tuesday. And
wow.
Chief got up while we were on there, and he got a bit emotional, and we were talking, and he said, "This is more than a game, boys. This is for the community." And I think in '97 the news of the BHP was going to shut, so a lot of people were losing jobs. I don't think it shut until '98, but they got the news that it was actually shutting in '97. So there was a lot of uneasiness in the community, and people were losing livelihoods, and there was a lot of negative feelings within the town. So I think for a lot of people, the only positive thing that they had during that year was that their footy team was having a crack on the weekend and half going all right, and then we made the grand final, and then it was like people starting to think, well, can we do this? We've been down, we've been getting the guts flogged out of us. Can our footy team, pull us out of the doldrums a bit, So, and Chief conveyed that to us really well, and we had the grand final breakfast, obviously, and all the lead up, and Joey having his noodle in the ribs the week before,
the punctured lung,
he might die headlines and all this sort of stuff, and it was a tremendous effort from Joey to come back and play after that, to do that and play the game he did was nothing short of amazing, but just to be involved. And I remember running out even before the game, where there used to be like cricket nets at the back because the SCG was right at the back of the footy stadium. So there used to be cricket nets at the back, and we'd warm up there. So we went out to warm up, and I remember Malcolm, because I'd played second row all year, and I'd forced my way into the starting side as a second rower that year. And
you played hooker, didn't you?
Yeah, the game before against North Sydney, I think Lee Jackson had been struggling a little bit, and the bloke that had been playing hooker, Brett Clements, who would have been playing in the grand final, had hurt he'd done a groin injury, so he wasn't able to play. So Malcolm came and said to me, "I want you to play hooker." And I said, "I've never played hooker before. I prefer to play second row, but if the team's confident in me and it's going to benefit the team, then I'll do it." And he said, "Yeah, well, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you to play hooker." So,
wow. Put you on the spot in the grand final. Wow.
Yeah, well, I actually played the game against North Sydney at hooker.
Oh, right.
So I had one warm-up game, and so we get there and we're doing the warm-up, and Malcolm sort of I caught him out of the corner of my eye, and he's walking over to me, and I'm thinking, what's he going to do? Is he going to sack me? Like, is he going to put someone else in straight away? And he came over and he said to me, "Oh, you'll be all right." And I didn't know what to think about it. It was actually put me off a little bit. I was thinking, he said, "You're going to be all right?" And I felt like saying to him, "Yeah, I know I'm going to be all right." But,
trying to focus on the game.
Yeah, I think it was his little way of just giving me a nod that he had confidence in me, and the team had confidence in me. So to be in that foreign position in a big game like that was made a little easier by the relationship that I had with Andrew and Matthew, and having known them for so long, and I'd played in the forwards with the rest of the boys all year, so felt like we all respected each other in that. Yeah, from there it was game on, and it was just, we ran out in the field and there was just a sea of red and blue and noise, and just the memories of Chief the night before calling us into a room after we had our meeting with Malcolm. Chief said, I want you all up in my room now, and the boys, it was really raw and emotional. I know Mark Glanville was in tears, and And Chief spoke really well. Matt and Joe spoke really well. All the boys spoke from the heart, and it was all about we're not going to let each other down. We're here for a reason. It's bigger than ever. This is what it means to us. And it was when we left that room at sort of 8 or 9 o'clock the night before the game, we all wanted to play straight away. We were that sort of fired up and that up for the contest straight away, But we had to settle our heels until the next day. And I remember running out into the field and I crossed paths with Matty Johns, and just the look in his eye, and I sort of nodded to him as if to say, "No, I promise I won't let you down." So and I could see the same in his eyes. So it was a pretty special moment to run out in that field, and then it was an old school opening. Like, it was a pretty violent start of the game.
Definitely. You guys were so fired up. Just every tackle was like 3 blokes in, just smashing them. It rattled them. It really did.
Well, it seemed to, and they were, but they brought their game too. Like Big Spud was sort of arcing up, and they were all sort of. It was on. It was a proper grand final. So yeah, it was nice to be involved in an old school sort of softening up period, they used to call it. But, and then they were a good side, and they forged their way in front by half time, and so that we really had to knuckle down and work hard to sort of navigate a way back into the game. And I think Robbie O scored from the space of the scrum, just after half time, and I think we might have got a penalty goal as well just after that, which put us back in touch. And then from then on, it was game on, and the rest is history, I suppose. Robbie O scored a try to level us up with not long to go, and then it was like a field goal attempt-a-thon. I think Clifton had a couple, and he
hit
may
the
have
post.
hit the post with one. And Matty Johns hit the post with one, and then the one that got charged down, and then Joey goes to dummy half and dummies to the blind side and picks Albie up on the middle with I think there was 6 seconds to go in the grand final to win us the grand final. And the scenes were pretty.
And where were you? Amazing. Where were you, Billy? When they scored the try?
When they scored the try, I'd been on for 70 minutes, so I was back on the bench. So I was like a keen spectator, and when I saw Albie go over, I think Mark Glanville was standing next to me, so I think I grabbed hold of him and nearly hugged him to death. And I think Wayne Richards was there too, and we were dancing around like we were from the Moulin Rouge. I think it was a pretty special time, and it's pretty well known the shenanigans that happened after the game and all that sort of stuff. And
that was the thing. It went for so long, and the crowd was just ready. They was just waiting for you to get back to Newcastle and party hard.
Yeah, it was like, I think coming back into Newcastle at Wall's End, people were lining the streets up, and there was a police car in front of us, and for whatever reason, I think a couple of people had got on the road. So I'm positive it was both Matty and Andrew got out and we actually surfed standing on top of the police car as it was driving along. And then we got to the old the West Club now, which was the old Workers Club at the time, and the bus pulled up out the front just within this sea of people. It was like literally pushing through a sea of people at about 2 or 3 kilometres an hour, and they had the horse that used to run around the game. That horse was out in the street among the people. It was how someone didn't get either run over by the people were climbing up on top of the bus. How someone didn't get run over
police
by the bus or kicked by the horse. I don't know, but it was a pretty amazing celebration, and just to see the town so happy and proud was it was. You often say that you just wish that your friends could see it from your perspective. It's something that's so hard to put into words, that the elation and some of it's relief that you've actually achieved what you've set out to. And it's not just a yearly thing, it's something that you've set out your entire professional life leads up to that one moment to win a grand final. So it's it's for some people it was a 15-year journey, to get to that point. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was sort of unbridled scenes of elation and relief.
Yeah. I was at the Screaming Jets concert, and you had the big celebration. What's the
Civic Park.
Yeah, Civic Park. Yeah.
Yep.
And everyone was wearing like their black shirt. I wore a white shirt and a blue hat, and I'm at the front. I caught Andrew Johns when he jumped into the crowd during the concert. So yeah, I was glad to be my small part of it as well. So great times, great time. And it continued for probably like a week, didn't it?
Yeah, it was sort of. I think we wore our welcome out at most of the places we went to. It was the first night or two, everywhere we went, people were shouting us drinks, and it was By about the Wednesday, it was like, oh no, here they come again. It was like they were trying to shut the door, so we couldn't get in. So it was the people in town were tremendous, and I think they seemed to enjoy the moment as much as we did, and we certainly loved the interaction that we had with the people in the town, and it was pretty, as much as there was a bit of larrikinism, it was pretty wholesome, it was good times.
Absolutely, yeah. And it started all these Ticketek parades, and I haven't seen too many times where people are lining 30, 40 kilometres along the highway just to wave your flag and just give the support. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, I think it was on the Tuesday we had the Ticketek parade. We came from Stockland, Jesmond.
Yeah.
And there was pretty much people the whole way along the street. So we were in open-top cars just sitting in the back and just waving and, interacting with fans and that. So it was... and actually, speaking of Lee Jackson, he actually lost his grand final ring that day. It fell off his hand while he was...
Oh, right.
High-fiving people in the crowd, and a bit of a fact, a not very well known fact is, people like revere those grand final rings. You don't give that away.
Yeah.
Well, Steve Crowe actually gave his grand final ring to Leo Denver. So Steve Crowe came off the bench and played a really good game, and Leo Denver had played halfback while Andrew Johns was injured, but missed out on selection because Andrew came back from injury. So Steve Crowe actually gifted his grand final ring to Leo Denver,
that's amazing.
It was an amazing thing for him to do, and Leo was overwhelmed with with happiness and pride. And I think it was it was a one of the more selfless things that I've seen anyone do. So it was hats off to Crowe for doing that. It was a pretty amazing gesture.
He had a great season that year. And if it wasn't for him, like the way he played to replace Andrew Johns, I mean, wow. Yeah, he played really good.
Yeah, well, Joey had an ankle reconstruction. I think he missed 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So Leo stepped in and the team didn't miss a beat because of the way Leo conducted himself and played. Obviously, so completely different types of players. Yeah, he kept the ship sort of going when it could have derailed without Andrew there, but he gave us that X factor to get us through.
So what was your contract at that stage? Because for that, it was the Super League. So did you have to re-sign your contract that year or the year before? Or
I was actually coming off contract. So in the Super League year, I'd signed a 3-year deal, which was 95, 96, 97. So I was actually coming off the contract, which... a lot of blokes paid houses off and that sort of thing with their Super League contract. I was lucky to buy a Tonka truck with mine, so it wasn't it wasn't too bad, but it wasn't in the stratosphere of the other boys, But
were you still working at that stage, Billy? Sorry to cut you off there.
I'd earned enough at that stage to go professional, but pretty much only just. So, but to me that was a dream to be able to play footy for a living.
Yeah.
We used to joke about it at training and say, don't tell them we'd be doing this for free. We were getting paid to play footy, so it was amazing. And so I came off contract after the grand final. So, I spoke to St George, and actually St George, who our old coach David Waite had been coaching St George, I was close to going there, but I was probably closest to going to South Sydney because they came up with a really good offer. And there was some doubt that they may not be in the competition for the I was after a 3-year contract. So for the third year, there was some doubt they may not be in the competition, but they guaranteed they would pay me for that year. So if they weren't in, I would have been able to double dip that year, which turns out they did falter and weren't in the competition. So I would have probably got paid twice that year. But when I looked at it, I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it because I loved the town, the team. I loved what I was doing. And I was a country boy at heart. I didn't really want to move to Sydney, so I ended up knocking back the South Sydney offer and deciding to stay. And it was one of those funny situations where our football manager, who was negotiating the contracts at the time, Dave Morley, he'd owned the Cricketers Arms Hotel previous to that. So he was not only an administrator, but probably a friend to all of us. And, he's just, God bless his soul, passed away a couple of months ago, Dave. So, but in the contract negotiations after the grand final, I said to him, "Oh, yeah, right, I'm going to stay." So I shook his hand, looked him in the eye and said, "I'm going to stay." And I think it was not till about September the next year when I actually signed the contract for that year. Because he just said, "Yeah, it's right." And I just said, "Oh, yeah, it's right." And that was the way it worked back then. He ended up chasing me up and saying, "Mate, you better sign that contract or it's going to be illegal what we're doing." But that was the level of trust we had in each other at the time.
Yeah, I really wish some of the modern players could listen to what you just said just then, because gone are the days of the loyalty, staying at a one team club and playing for the money. So what do you think about that?
I can see both sides of it. Particularly from the player's point of view. Like, that's a very limited career. They've got to make whatever they can, and as we see now, as we've spoken before, the violence of the game with the injuries and the CTEs and whatever, you do pay to play. There is a price that you pay that the average Joe doesn't understand, that you actually put yourself through in terms of injuries and possibly what you'll go through post-career. So there is a small window of earning potential, but also the game's evolved to the point where there's so much money in the game now. Where
absolutely.
Clubs are treated like businesses. They don't treat the players with any loyalty either. So they can't then say to the players, "Oh, you should be loyal to us," because any hint of anything, they're selling them off or getting rid of them. So
that's right.
I can see why the players don't have loyalty these days, and obviously there's player managers and all that sort of stuff. Are probably much more involved these days than they were back then. They were obviously involved, but not probably not as heavily as they are now. And whenever there's big amounts of money, whenever there's more bigger figures of money, there's less trust.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
If you get screwed over on a contract, that could financially break someone these days. Not that it couldn't back then, but it was a little bit more. It's a little bit more ruthless in terms of the business side of things nowadays than it was back then. I think so. I think it's just a natural progression of the game, which is sad. It's sad, but the last couple of years I've been calling them franchises, not clubs. It's become very Americanized.
So true.
Where they're a franchise and they're not a club anymore. So which is sad, but that's just the evolution of professionalism, and it's only going to get more so, I think,
And speaking of professionalism, we skip a couple of years after 97, and it's 4 years later, we get to another grand final, 2001. And the type of footy that you were playing in 97 compared to 2001, don't you think that evolved a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. It changed a lot. We had Chief and Butts in the front row in 97, and I was playing hooker, and then we had Wayne Richards and Adam Muir in the back row and Mark Glanville playing lock. So there was only really a few of us that made it through to the 2001 side, So our the way we played, evolved, and we didn't have Matty at 5'8" anymore. Matty had gone, and Matty had gone to he went to Wigan actually in 2001 before he went to the Sharks. So And we had Ben Kennedy in the back row. We had Big Mac Parsons as one front row, Josh Perry. And then we had a young bloke called Danny Badiris playing hooker who pretty much revolutionised that position. He made it into a ball playing, what they call part of the spine. He's part of the spine now, a real sort of influence, more so of an influence on the game, I think. And that was on the back of the way Danny played and the way he combined with Andrew, That they had a tremendous understanding and it was great to play outside of because it was like, if you compare it to a car, it's like driving along in a Rolls Royce when you're getting service from those blokes, So it's the way we played changed. It became a bit more football oriented and free flowing rather than that stand them up, bash them up sort of style that we had previous to that. So
and faster. So like the game just seemed to get faster.
Yeah, the game evolved to the point where it was, So it was it was certainly contrasting, and I've been asked to compare them, before, and it's. I think Andrew came up with a comment that it's like trying to pick a favourite child. You can't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's pretty hard, but I think it was for me. It was a special night because I was getting on in years, and I was club captain. Andrew was team captain, so it was pretty special to be in that position and be there on grand final night. And it was the first night grand final, so it was.
There was nearly 100,000 there.
Yeah, it was before they reduced the capacity, so they'd reduced it from 110 to 100 or something like
just
that.
Just after the Olympics.
So so there was I think 92,000 people there, which was the noise was just something to be seen, and then. I was fortunate enough to score a couple of tries. So
first try scorer.
First try scoring a grand final. It was boys' own stuff. Like to think that the kid that have dreamt of, not even really dreamt of it because I didn't think it would happen. To be there on grand final day and to be on the same sort of stage that the Brett Kennys and the Eric Gross and to be on that same stage and actually score a try or two tries, was pretty amazing, and something that I'm very humbled to have been a part of and be a part of that team. I mentioned, some of those blokes like Matt Parsons, still one of my great mates. Andrew, Mark, Robbie O, Ben Kennedy,
Tahoe, Gidley. It's like a who's who of.
I could name the whole squad, and Danny Harris, that we're still thick as thieves now, which is great, So without that period and without that sporting environment, we would never have those relationships. So to me, those relationships are probably more important than the jumpers are got hanging on the wall or the rings that you can wear to a function. The friendships and the trust that you have with people that you've gone through a pretty tough period in your life. When I say tough, I mean like literally physically tough and emotionally tough to get to a grand final and go through what you have to go through to win it. It's a pretty special time and something that I feel very humbled to be a part of. And it was a good time.
When's it going to be the Knights again in the grand final winning? Come on,
it's a
fingers crossed.
Look, I don't think it's that far away. You look at the way the competition is now, and teams go from last to first in the blink of an eye. It's, a couple of key recruits here and there, and before you know it, teams are actually really kicking goals, and I think we're not far away from it. We've got some really talented kids there. We just need to get things put together. We've got good coaching staff. Adam's a good coach. He's got good support in Brian Mack and Rory Costation, and there's quite a few. There's some good people within the club. We just need to get the little things right, and I think we need to start. We just need to learn play together and get that sort of second nature, which you look at a team like Melbourne, they just everything's second nature. It's done on reflex almost, because they're so well drilled and well versed in what they're doing, So I don't think it's that far away. We got you got Kalen there, who on his day is the best player in the competition.
Yes.
So,
Agreed.
you got the Safidi boys, Origin, Tyson Frizzell, Origin, Dane Gagai. We've got 5 or 6 Origin players.
Even Lockie Miller came out of nowhere early and just fitted in really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the young boys, we brought in a couple of, you got Adam Elliott coming in, you got Tyson Gamble, you got young Phoenix Crossland playing hooker and going well. We've had a setback with Jaden Brayley doing his knee, but
that guy can't catch a break, can he?
Yeah, he'll be bigger and better next year. So and there'll be competition for spots, and that's what makes a competitive team, a winning team, is competition. So I don't think it's that far away, and I know that I'm a pretty biased one-eye supporter, but I literally don't think it's too far away.
It's good to hear. And after your Knights career finished next year, I do believe you finished the 2002 season. Is that your last season with the Knights?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I moved
then
over
to London.
I moved over to the London Broncos.
Yeah.
I had a season over there.
What was that experience like?
I absolutely loved it. It was. I loved the game over there. I loved the Super League. I felt that it suited my game, and I had what I thought was probably one of my better years, and a really enjoyable year. So.
Is there plans to have another season with the Knights, or was it the time was right?
I think the time was right. I sat down with Michael Hagan and some of the other coaches, and Mark Sargent, who was the then football manager or director of football at the time. And we sort of decided that, it was time to give someone else a go, and we had young Daniel Abrahams coming up. Right. Abraham, not Abrahams, but coming up through, as a young lock and looking really good. So I think the time was right for me to move on. And I'd always seen good players always go for a year or two in England to finish things off. And I just thought that I really wanted to have that experience, or to go over there and live in another country and do something different. So, it certainly didn't let me down. I really enjoyed it. I had the young family over there, and it was tremendous. But that was only for 1 year. It was a semi-successful year. We were at the point where we were quite competitive, and we had a good side too. I had blokes like Jim Dimmick, Russell Bowden, Dennis Moran, Still Retchless. We had a pretty good side. Tony Martin, So
right.
So it was a good team, and once again, I've kept in touch with quite a few of those boys as well. So it's something that I look back on fondly as well.
And then was it retirement after that, or did you come back and play some local football, or how did it all happen?
I retired from there. I came back and started working for the Knights as a strength and conditioning coach. I did that for 3 years.
3 years, right, yes.
Then the call came again from London, so I went back over there as strength and conditioning coach to work for they were the same club, but they were called London Harlequins then. They were owned by Harlequins, the rugby union club. So we had a rugby league arm and a rugby union arm. So I did that for another 3 years. And then the kids were getting to the point where I wanted them to grow up in Australia rather than England be home for them. And then when I did eventually want to come home, they weren't coming home. They would have been leaving their home to come to my home. You know what I mean? So I wanted to get them home. Yeah, so I finished up and started a career in mining. So it's been sort of pretty much shift work and late nights and early mornings ever since.
A bit of an adjustment from playing football all the time?
Yeah, it was, and it's certainly to learn, to come from something you've done all your life or your adult life to go in and to go and do something completely different was certainly a learning experience. But there was a lot of parallels with sport that I didn't realise would carry across into your working life. And if there's any piece of advice I would give to a younger player is that take notice of those lessons that you learn on the field and at training, because they're valuable lessons when you get into the workforce. The teamwork, the work ethic, and there's many parallels that can be used within your working life. So certainly something I would say to make sure you take notice of.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've been given, and I always try and say it to other people, is that everyone gets an opportunity in life. Be ready when it comes. So there's no point getting your opportunity and you hadn't trained hard enough that week or for the last 6 months, or train as though, be as though it's your opportunity's coming tomorrow and you're going to be ready for it. So
yes,
that would be the biggest piece of advice I give. And the other one is, if you do get an opportunity, you've earned yourself an opportunity to work hard. You haven't made it. Because a lot of people get to a club or they sign with an NRL club or an ARL club or whatever it is, Super League club. They think they've made it. You haven't made it. If you think you've made it, you're on the way out already.
That's right.
You've got to treat it as though every day is a job interview. It's one of those things that's, you can never be comfortable, and as soon as you start feeling comfortable, then that's when you're on the outer. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's the only advice I've pretty much been given and got, that I would really feel comfortable passing on to other people.
Yeah. And I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were put in the Cessnock Team of the Century in 2011. What does that mean to you?
Oh, it's really humbling. You think the Team of the Century. There's been so many uncompromising, tough, great men that have played for that club over the years, and many of whom I watched and looked up to. So to be named in that group of men was truly humbling, and I felt sort of overawed a little bit by that, and extremely proud to be named in that bunch. So it was that was a good time, and something that I'm really proud of. Because to grow up in a town like that loves rugby league and is in the heartland of rugby league, you don't even dream that that's going to happen to you. So for things like that to happen, it's an amazing feeling, and it's something that's hard to describe, and it's a pretty emotional thing to have happen for you. So it was I feel really humbled to be named within that group of men.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, by the way. 2 years ago, I interviewed Mark Hughes, and I had a great chat with him, talked about his career, and he was telling me about the Mount Everest trip, and I do believe you went as well. I've seen pictures on your Instagram that you actually did that Mount Everest trip as well. Tell us about that experience, and tell us about the Mark Hughes Foundation. I know you're a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I'm actually fortunate enough to be an ambassador for the foundation. So
great.
The whole trek thing came about. It was sort of, myself and Chief had a bit of a conversation one Christmas Day about, our mate's in the fight of his life. How can we contribute a little bit and do some more other than just sitting around?
Yes.
So we decided to come up with these treks. So we started off with Kokoda. We did Kokoda, and then we did Mount Everest Base Camp, and we did the Death March in Borneo, and some of the other lads did Kilimanjaro in Africa. So we're up to about our 5th trek coming up this year, and we're going to go back over to Nepal and hopefully summit one of the mountains near Mount Everest. So that'll be pretty
so cool.
But, to go to Mount Everest Base Camp is once again something I never thought I'd do, and it's probably an expense that I never thought I'd have. But it's a great cause. So we all tip in ourselves. We all pay for everything, and every bit of money we raise goes to the Mark Hughes Foundation and to the amazing brain cancer nurses that the foundation supports, that give people that have just been diagnosed with brain cancer support and help through their journey from start to possibly if it ends up to end of life. So it's something that we're all really passionate about, and we're all trying to do what we can to get better outcomes for people with brain cancer.
Yeah. I'm a 2-hour flight away, Billy, from Mount Everest, so I'll meet you. I'll have a beer with you when you come over.
Meet us in Kathmandu, and we'll have a shandy, mate.
Let's do it.
Once again, trying to raise awareness and funds for the Mark Hughes Foundation to make outcomes better for brain cancer patients. So it's if any listeners are out there, or whether you're international or Aussie, if you jump on the Mark Hughes website, you can buy yourself a beanie. I think they're about $20, $25 Australian, and you get yourself a fashionable beanie, and you also give people with brain cancer hope that there might be some sort of better outcome and a cure for brain cancer one day.
Absolutely. It's an amazing cause, and Mark's done such a great job. Anything that I can do to promote it, I'm very happy to do it. Social medias, Billy, where can people find you?
Yeah, just on Billy Peden on Facebook, or just I think it's Billy Peden 13 on Instagram. So
yeah, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions, and you give me your top 2 or 3 answers as of today. Are you ready, Billy? Who are your top 2 or 3 favorite bands of all time?
Top 2 or 3 favorite bands? Well, I'd have to say Pearl Jam would be number one. Some quality old school Aussie stuff in the Angels and AC/DC.
Nice. Who are the top 2 or 3 favorite players you've played with?
Players I've played with, obviously Big Chief, Chief Harrigan. He's looked after all of us over the years and probably saved us a few black eyes as well as Joey Johns as well, and probably Ben Kennedy.
Oh, yeah. One of my favourite players too, BK. Great. Outside of rugby league, do you follow any other sporting teams?
Probably not so much teams, but individual sports people I like to watch and see. Obviously, you got your it's incredible to see what the All Blacks have done over decades. Yeah. How successful that they've been over the years is incredible, and I think you'd have to be living under a rock if you hadn't seen the Last Dance with Michael Jordan in it. That I just think that's an incredible story about sport and just triumph in general. The way that they went about being so successful for such a long period was amazing.
Right. Will the Newcastle Knights make the grand final this year?
I'm going to say yes.
Come on.
I'm going to say yes with my heart, and hopefully. But I think a few things will have to fall into place for us for that to happen.
I wanted to ask about your surfing. Where's your top 2 or 3 places to go surfing?
Well, I just come back from a place called Lakey Peak in Sumbawa, so probably call that one. And then there's a place in South Sumatra that we don't actually. It's not really the done thing to say the places. So a place in South Sumatra.
And last question, who is your greatest inspiration or hero and why?
Probably my greatest inspiration and hero, probably he's not that famous, but it's my father. Growing up, I always saw my father act with integrity and courtesy. He always tried to put other people first, and that's something that I've tried to, although I sometimes fail. I've always tried to have a little bit of that about me in that I'm always trying to be courteous and do the right thing and conduct myself with integrity. So I'd say, that I've watched my father do that all his life, and it's something I'm quite proud of him for.
And something else I'm sure you're proud of, and I see all photos on your Instagram. I saw one of your daughters also graduated from university.
Yeah. My daughter graduated last year with a psychology degree, so she's doing her
fantastic.
Honors, and my youngest daughter is doing diagnostic radiography at university as well. So
wow,
certainly the apple fell a long way from the tree with that one. They didn't. But they're great kids, and I couldn't be more proud of them. But they just grow up too fast. One's 20 and one's 21.
Right. Well, I think that's a great way to finish off the podcast, Billy. Thank you very much for your time. You've given me some great memories over the years, especially with the grand final wins and going to watch you play on the hill at Marathon Stadium for many, many years. So thank you for coming on to the show. And, let's keep in touch. Let's have a beer when I come back to Newcastle.
Sounds good. Thanks, Craig. Appreciate having me on.
Hi, I'm Tony Fair, founder of Victorian Grooming Company. Is your beard feeling dry or the skin underneath itchy? Maybe you'd rather soften and tame your beard instead. Our classic collection of beard oils, balms, and soaps will leave your beard looking, feeling, and smelling amazing. And if you prefer shaving, our pre-shave oils and shave soaps will give you a smooth and razor burn-free shave. Handmade in Edmonton with natural ingredients. Visit victoriangrooming.com.